Hi, I'm Jim Capobianco. I wrote and directed Your Friend the Rat.
And I'm Nate Ragg. I'm the production designer of Your Friend the Rat.
Hello, I'm Remy, and this is my brother Emil.
So the idea of the film came while I was working on the feature way back in 2000, because we always do all this tons of research on our films, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be neat to actually use some of this in the short?
You did not say...
You know, a lot of people at Pixar have come from 2D, myself included, and love the form. And it was a great opportunity for a lot of animators to do 2D again. And so many people just embraced it. And unfortunately, we couldn't utilize all the animators at Pixar who do 2D or even wanted to try it. But we were able to get a good group together to handle it. And they all just had a blast. And I had a blast working with them to do this. And some of them had never even animated in this style of 2D before. The look of it came out of the old Disney 50s educational films that were done by Ward Kimball and others at the studio, and kind of one of the driving forces behind it to emulate those films a little bit. But it was really economical to do, and I thought that would be neat to do the short in that style. I think we were really trying to find our own voice within that, using that as a jumping off point. And actually the thing I found working on this was like, how do you make these sort of dry, some of these facts could be kind of dry, how do you make them entertaining and fun? And one of the challenges of putting the film together was trying to think of what is a funny way to get this information across, and in a succinct amount of time as well. But always add that little flourish to it, because that's actually what was wonderful about the Ward Kimball stuff, is that even no matter how limited it was or stylized, he would always add this little touch of full animation on one's little flourish, and would just bring that much life to it.
No, not that one. There it is.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, the animation, you're spending just as much time on it. You're just sort of pinpointing what areas you want to animate, Yeah, I think probably the best example of it in the cartoon is in this section right here with the Black Death. We have just a simple drawing of Linguini looking kind of funny. He falls over, and just his legs do this crazy little bit of animation, but just having those legs be in there and doing that fun little bit of animation really sells the whole idea that he's dead, but his legs are still kicking around a little bit.
That little final bug kick.
That's one thing that was kind of exciting about this short, was all the history and everything that goes into this cartoon is handled in a really funny way and isn't really taken that serious.
The brown rat, better known as
You're really trying to find what's the caricature of the moment, what's the gag you're trying to get across, and how do you caricature it the best way. Awesome styling of Chinese Zodiac by Teddy Newton, Nate, and Scott Morse.
One thing that was exciting for me coming onto this project was with all the short is basically broken down into 3 sections, and the first section is the history section, and Jim really wanted to capture each time period in the shot that we had. So for example, if we have a shot that dates back into the Roman era or in the Black Plague era, we were sort of I was asked to start referencing artwork and basically the way people created art back in those times, and try and style it up a little bit so that it had a neat sort of funny flair to it, but it also felt true to how they designed stuff back then.
Right, I mean, like the Revolution section, we wanted to get a real woodblock look for it. And even the way the animation was styled was to have a very staccato kind of feel to it. And actually, and if you went frame by frame through that section where the rat hits the other rat, you'd see this one gigantic hand.
Yeah, that's one thing that's really exciting about the 2D animation. There's different ways that you do it. You would handle it differently than in CG. CG, everything is kind of spelled out for you in the way you have to do it with the computer programs, but in 2D it's really more artistically free.
The stop motion shot, I just went, what if we did that globe shot in stop motion? And then it just felt like it would fit the the sort of educational aspect of the film. One of the things about stop motion, though, is it's just you have one shot at it, unlike everything else.
Well, just like they used to. The video game section that we had, we could have tried to sort of, draw something that felt like Canada, but instead Jim had this great idea that it would be a video game, so we handled it like an 8-bit video game, and it still felt like Canada, but it was really cheesy and silly at the same time.
I want to talk about the music a little bit. The music incorporates really well. One of the things I wanted to do, like in the old 50s animation, was to have the music written early enough that we could actually animate to it and it could actually inspire us and be really integrated within the story. And so having Alex Mandel do that, it really, I think, accomplished that. His wonderful collage art from Teddy Newton for this section. Just bits and pieces from everywhere. I don't know where he gets it all. Different magazines and photographs and stuff, and he just puts it all together.
Yeah, it really sort of makes you really believe each one of the materials that Emil's chewing through. It definitely feels like, oh, there's a door, there's a pipe, there's some cinder blocks.
People should just step through this animation, this 2D animation. It's just some really funny drawings within this, and you don't really see it going by, you just feel it, but the guys did such an amazing job.
Very flexible. We can
I think with this style of 2D too, you get this, it's really based on the design, the look of it is what speaks more than, say, the acting, or you're not really trying to incorporate the illusion of life.
I think the shot coming up here with right after the atomic explosion was one of the first bits of animation, and I think Bob Scott did it, and it really set the tone for how everything was going to be animated.
This one and this one actually did both of these one after the other, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did them both in like a week, and I remember we showed it at Dailies, and everyone was just like, oh, I get it, and it just...
Yeah, one of the difficulties we had with the animators was trying to get them to not do so much animation, to pull them back, and to do a little less with this stylized way.
I couldn't even believe how fast they animated a lot of this stuff.
I know,
they
it
just
went
was
really
like
quickly. We just passed our very scientific looking illustrations there of, though they're not labeled, I thought I should tell everybody, it's Louis Pasteur, Gertrude Elion, and Jonas Salk, the three scientists there. And here we come to, this is the one shot in the whole film that's integrated all our styles of animation. We have After Effects, we have 2D, stop motion, and all within the same, and computer, CG, all in the same shot. This was all done by Nate Ragg. He cleaned up the animation that was done in 2D, and we projected it on a chalkboard.
Yeah, that was really cool because Sarah animated everything by hand, and then we frame by frame projected it onto a large chalkboard, and I spent the day tracing it drawing by drawing with chalk, and it was it goes by really quick. It's probably about 6 seconds, but it took about 6 hours, I think.
Butterflies and puppy dogs, summer evenings, crispy frogs.
The song came out of I wanted to, when I was developing this, I was like, well, it's an educational film, I wanted to have a song in it, kind of like Schoolhouse Rock. That was done in the 70s that we grew up on. My good friend James Dash, I asked him, James is a Mac administrator here at Pixar, but a piano composer, and I said, hey, let's do a song, I don't know if they'll go for it, but let's just try it. And we sat down and both wrote this song, and we wanted it to have a rough feel, and neither of us having written an actual song before sort of has that. And also Pat and Pete not really having, not being professional singers, it also has that feel of two guys coming together to sing a song, and kind of all came together. It was one of those Hail Mary shots where I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just try it. Let's just go for it, and it did. The ending, I love this sort of integration with CG and the 2D plane. It kind of pulls together the two ideas we're playing with a lot in the film, with 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional. And then the idea to play with text, that graphic everything. And it's just something I don't think we've ever done here at the studio, where we've integrated this way and kind of went with this very broad humor of the Tex Avery kind of style of cartooning. So, well, that's the end, and I hope everybody enjoyed the commentary. And it was a joy to make this short, and I had so much fun working with all these people you see right here, and the truly talented group. And I hope to work with all of them again someday, especially this guy sitting next to me.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get to do this again. It was a blast for me. Great opportunity to just really get to explore all the fun ideas in the cartoon and try and put some art to them.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Doug Sweetland, and I'm the director of Presto. I'd like to take this opportunity to just point out all the brilliant contributions of everyone who worked on this short. But unfortunately, that would take the length of a feature. So I salute you, Presto crew forever. And instead, we'll just discuss some of the underlying ideas that are at the heart of Presto, things that we were thinking about while we were making the short. Starting out, it's clearly sort of a classic cartoon throwback, but with some key differences that I think make it intrinsically Pixar. First, the short takes place in real time, which means that we can't really cross-dissolve from like a gag to another or from one set piece to another, as is often the case in old classic cartoons. Ours has to run in real time, much more like its own sort of sequence in a feature or something, which makes it then a self-contained story in 5 minutes and not a serial. Lastly, it's entirely pantomimed, meaning that even though they have voices, we can't use jazzy dialogue to kind of push things along. One idea we wanted to convey early on is just that Presto is, well, he's clearly a cad. And that even though he has these powerful magical hats, he doesn't really have any magical powers himself. And so, in a way, this whole act, is sort of his exploitation of these hats and this rabbit rather than by his own merit. In fact, a friend had pointed out how limited his imagination is. He has what might be the most powerful device in the world, this sort of teleportation device, and he only uses it to stage sort of a mediocre magic act. Another important concept from a character standpoint was just making Alec as sympathetic as possible. So here we are in sort of the gag, on-stage, off-stage section of the short, and just notice that Alec's brows are incredibly sad. He's doing some sadistic things to Presto, but we just felt for the humanity of the short that he's not himself a sadist. He's actually incredibly apologetic and wishes that it didn't have to come to this, but it just simply must come to this. Really, that was like a tweak that came sort of late in the process, and it came just right down to changing his brows. For the longest time, they were sort of like angry brows. And just lightening them up and making him look sorry, I think adds to the sympathy and hopefully to the humor of that stretch. Another thing is just notice that he doesn't really ever move from that spot on the table, and that's another important thing. You think classic cartoons, everything's got to be completely zany, but a lot of, hopefully, the humor and certainly the strength of Alec as a character stems from the fact that he's able to do all of these things without actually even really barely moving at all. Certainly not if you're looking at his feet. And so I think an interesting thing to point out, Presto has to move a tremendous amount. He's running up and down the stage. He's very physical. He affects Alec not at all. Alec not moving is able to then affect Presto a tremendous amount. Looking at the latter gag, this is just an interesting example of the story process. That gag was really controversial just because its physics aren't sort of obvious. So we tried cutting it, but actually it made its way back in the reels simply as a way of getting Presto back to center stage so he could smash the carrot. That is interesting to me in that it didn't make its way back in by its own merit, but simply as this ulterior sort of choreography. Looking towards the end, there's actually a pretty huge hole in logic, and it's coming up. It's when Presto brings the carrot back. Now, you remember when he smashes the carrot on the table, he has no intention or reason at all to save the carrot for later. But we get past this point where Alec has saved Presto's life, and he's somehow able to play it off as if he'd intended to bring back the carrot the whole time. But yet, again, for no reason at all. And it's just interesting to me that in having shown this short, around the world, no one has ever brought that up to me. The fact that it's basically this flawed logic. And I think it's because hopefully the audience is invested so much in what's going on a character level that they want Presto to bring the carrot back. And the fact that he's a magician and he performs a magician's trick is excuse enough to allow the carrot to sort of exist again. Another thing is it sets up Alec coming out of the hat at the end, which was intended sort of as an ironic resolution, that only when Presto completely gives up on the idea of trying to get Alec to come out of the hat does Alec come out of the hat. Only when he makes a true gesture of reconciliation does he get what he wanted all along. So this is the happy ending that you don't normally see in classic cartoons. And I have to say, it worried me for a while that it might not play because it's sort of unconventional, but I am very satisfied now that we did indeed find the best ending for the short. It's one of my favorite parts. Lastly, I would just add that what you've watched is just a combination of unbelievable talents. Definitely plural. I don't think there's any one person's work over another. And so again, I just sing the praises of absolutely everybody who contributed to this short. So that brings us to the end of Presto, and thank you very much for watching.
Hello, my name is Angus MacLean, and I was the director of Bernie, the short film that's happening just to the left of Wall-E, feature film. The idea of Bernie came from wanting to do more with this little character that was stuck outside of the ship. Right in the middle of production of Wall-E, I'd animated a scene with Bernie, the scene that appears in the feature, and I'd wanted to animate this particular shot because Bernie was a welder and my father at one time had been a welder. And I realized that we never found out what happened to Bernie. So I pitched to Andrew Stanton, director of Wall-E, that we cut back to Bernie later on in the story. And this central idea of Bernie getting the screws put to him is a joke that's set up but never really paid off in the feature. And so Andrew couldn't figure out a way, without slowing the pace down, of showing Bernie again in the feature film, but he encouraged me to board up something as a short film, potentially. And the result of that is Bernie. Bernie was a really appealing character to me because of his limitations. He didn't have any mouth, and he could do far less than Wall-E could. So the challenge was getting his emotion and how he was feeling through storytelling and through the way that it was being edited and the shots were composed. I knew that I wanted to have Beethoven's Ode to Joy at the end of the movie. So when there was the idea of Bernie humming to himself, I figured it would be a nice idea to have him humming Ode to Joy. Plus, rights-wise, you know, I think it's public domain. I hope so. So here's a total cheat. You can see where the door's opening and there's no light there. And this isn't even on the ship where he would be. It's a total movie cheat. I like the idea of Bernie not knowing about hand waving. And since Wall-E is kind of introducing humanity to everybody on the ship, and the whole idea of the film was that Wall-E makes everyone's life better, but except for this one robot who actually, he makes this robot's life worse for him having shown up. But he does teach Bernie how to wave. So there's really two stories going on in this short film. There's the story of what's happening to Bernie, and then there's the feature story from the movie. And we needed to come up with a quick shorthand to remind the audience at what point in the movie the events of Bernie, the movie, was happening. So here is a reminder of what part of Wall-E, the feature film, we're viewing. And then there's the Bernie short film. Here his boss has 3 of these light spires, so the audience knows he only has 3 chances. Successful movies have a series of rules that you're following, and you understand the parameters, and then you play with those. The parameters here, there are 3 light spires, so he has 3 chances. And with those set of rules, it was clear like what each character was thinking. So he is successful here at attaching one of the light spires, but it's not on. I tried to tell earlier that he had to turn off the power before he operated on the light, which is really good to learn, that you should always turn off the electricity before doing any electrical work. This section is really meant to be what you missed just after the shot in the feature of Bernie stuck outside, very lonely, and no one's paying attention. And meanwhile, the film is going on inside. So when we started thinking of ideas of different ways he could get back into the ship, we just thought back to what was going on in the movie, and the garbage area was one of the sections where technically he could maybe get back inside the ship. Even though the garbage airlock and this particular door isn't exactly in the correct orientation in the spaceship in the movie, but no one knows that, it's fine. To me, what's really, really funny about this universe of Bernie, this kind of subterranean world that he works in, is that his only job is to attach broken light spires on the ship. That's it. And then Supplier's only job is to just distribute these light spires. So each character only has really one thing that they're supposed to do. The mechanics of this, of how Bernie would have to press this button and then that would be the thing that would finally light up the light, was difficult to sell. I don't know if it actually reads, but it was important that he not actually get the light on automatically so it wouldn't ruin the end joke. You notice the elevator here says ELV 426, which is a thinly veiled reference to Aliens. The planet on Aliens and Alien is LV 426, so that's elevator 426. Totally nerdy. I love this shot, this Stargate shot. It really feels like an old optical effect. And we'd spent a lot of time in this movie trying to make it feel like a 70s, 80s sci-fi film and not do too many effects that look too computer generated. Bernie stands for Basic Utility Robot Nano Engineer, which is completely made up after the fact. Originally, I was thinking about calling him Weld R, and when we made the feature, his name was RepairBot. I feel like acronyms, especially in late 70s, early 80s, were very big with robots. You needed to have an acronym. You couldn't just call a robot Bob or Maximilian. It had to stand for something really, really ridiculous. And in that vein, we went with Bernie and Supply R. Terrible, terrible jokes. I think that children pay attention to the details a lot of times that adults miss. There are aspects of the detail of what Bernie goes through that I kind of imagine him as a kid, where the parents are like Wally and Eve and they're going off and having their adventures. And Bernie is this kid that everyone's forgotten about. And so when children watch this film and then watch the feature a second time, hopefully they see the feature first, that they say, oh, this is what's happening to Bernie while the main feature is happening. Or if the camera would just pan left a little bit, you'd catch Bernie. So the idea of these doors was I kind of wanted to destroy the world with mechanical doors. It's kind of weird. I had a great crew on this film. Everyone really believed in the project. And one of the difficult things about doing a film that's attached to the feature is you're making it right after the feature. And so everyone has to work really, really hard on just one more thing. The effort really, really paid off. The whole crew really made this feel like an extension of the film. And not only in content, but also in quality. And I'm really grateful for that. It was a pleasure and a privilege to work on it with them.
Hi, my name is Pete Sohn, and I'm the director of Partly Cloudy. And this is the first thing I directed here at Pixar. Partly Cloudy started off as an idea that I had as a young boy when my mom took me to the movies. My mother, she's Korean, so movie experiences with her was very interesting because she didn't speak or understand English very well. And because we were living here in America, every movie that we saw was in English. Most of the time, she didn't understand what the people were saying, or she didn't really get the gist of some of the scenes in these movies. She would ask me in Korean, what were they saying? And I'd explain and do my best to translate, but my Korean wasn't very good. And so there would always be these kind of little wonky miscommunications of, this is what that character said in the movie, and she would just shrug her shoulders and kind of move on to the next thing. But there were movies that we did see that made a huge impact on me because she could understand these movies without having to speak or understand English very well. One of those movies was Dumbo. I remember my mom taking me to see Dumbo, and I remember in the opening scene of that movie, there were storks delivering all these baby animals to this circus train. As a kid, I wondered, where did these birds get these babies from? And that was kind of the seed. It all started from there. I had that idea and I forgot about it, and then years later, working at Pixar, I had an opportunity to pitch some short ideas, and one of them was that seed. Where do storks get their babies from? And what is that world? Maybe it was like a postal service. And you know what? What if the clouds made the babies? They could use their lightning powers and sculpt the cotton-like quality of the clouds that they're sitting on. That was kind of the inception of the short film, and is pretty much what I had pitched to John Lasseter and the other directors here at Pixar. My first pitch of the story, they talked about that they loved the concept, they loved the world, and they loved the beginnings of what these characters could be, but there was no story yet. And there wasn't. And so I went back to the drawing table and just tried to come up with, what do I want to say with the story? Okay, who are these guys? Some of my favorite stories have this personal element to it that is real. And somewhere in the middle of the story process, I started thinking about my relationship with my mother. I talk about watching these movies with my mom, but that communication barrier that I had with my mother kind of seeped into this thing. One of the kind of tenets of making the short was I didn't want any dialogue. I wanted it to be this kind of silent film where the characters would respond to each other without speaking any language. Thinking about my relationship with my mom, because she spoke Korean and didn't speak English very well, and I spoke English but not Korean very well. That started to click into things of how we would miscommunicate. I started thinking of this cloud as my mother, and I am this stork, trying to communicate with my mom, and how to solve this weird miscommunications that we had all our lives. What's the answer to that? I always wanted to do best by her, but sometimes she thought I was trying to do something negative, or she misunderstood something and explode her top, and I would have to reel back and look, no, that's not what I meant to say or what I meant to do. I'm sorry, you took that wrong. And that kind of fit really well with what the story was turning out, because once I set up that Gus the Cloud character had other clouds that were making easier and cute animals that looked fun to be with, it was that kind of miscommunication that I thought, that I could exploit. Like, okay, what if this bird always kept looking over there to the fun cloud, and Gus would think, does this bird want to leave me? There are definitely experiences that I've had with my mother where she would think, are you trying to do that? And no, that's not what I'm trying to do. But how do I communicate that without saying it in dialogue? And it was all about this idea that, you know what? I don't speak the same language that you do. I love you. I am here for you. And how do I best express that to you? The ending came from thinking about a gesture. When I was a kid, my mother used to draw with me all the time. When we'd fight about language problems or things that were happening in our lives, but then I could communicate with her with drawings, and there was this kind of gesture that I could make contact with her with art. This ending in the short really was about how to communicate a gesture of love. When Peck, the stork, comes back and reveals that all he's looking for was this protection, that's the gesture. That was the gesture of love, saying, I love you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna always be here for you. Bob Peterson was a huge help in finding that last gesture, so thank you, Bob, for the love. Thanks, John Lasseter, for the guidance. There's so many people to thank, but just one big cloudy hug for everyone that was giving and showing and supporting the short.
Hello, my name is Ronnie Del Carmen. I'm the director and writer of Doug's Special Mission.
Hi, I'm Brad Weinmiller. I was the supervising technical director.
We wanted to extend the stories of the main movie. So I thought of this short because I wanted to find out what Doug was doing there in the fog when Carl and Russell meet Doug. He has such a great heart. I love watching Doug. He's easily the most lovable character in the movie, so I wanted to kind of explore that as much as I can.
The other thing about Doug, actually from the film itself, was he was one of the last characters that we worked on. We were still working out all the kinks all the way to the end of the film, trying to get his fur to look right, to get his animation to look right. So it was kind of neat that once we figured it out at the end, you wrote another story to push it just a little bit farther.
I actually wanted to give Doug more adventures. I put him on a biplane. He almost destroyed a dirigible. There are all sorts of stories that I wanted to put in there, but due to the constraints of making this short, the producer told me that you should be able to use 90%, if not 100%, only the things that we used in the movie. And it actually ended up being quite an asset. It helped me focus on the one story I wanted to tell.
My job is to figure out how to reuse all these props, and then what ones I have to modify to make work, such as the rolling rock. We didn't have any large boulders in Up. We had a lot of flat rocks, so what we did is we took 2 rocks, merged them together to make one.
And it looked perfectly okay until I looked at it and say, hey, that kind of looks like a monkey. And it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Every time I see it, it's the monkey rock.
Aha! I see you, Rock.
I love doing the art direction for the short. I am my one-man band there at the beginning, figuring out, what colors do I want here? What kind of lighting do I want here? Because I wanted to kind of feel different from the movie. So it was fun to actually exercise that kind of detail.
And then the lighting in this was more Doug-friendly. It really showed his features.
Mm-hmm. The hair actually gave us a lot of problems. We had teams of people actually making sure that all those stray hairs that were just sticking out all over the place. So somebody please take some clippers to that.
And we
It's
do.
very
We
distracting.
actually, and we in the computer, we actually go in and we shave what we say, some of the hairs. We like cut them. And then there is the sand. We did not have any sand in Up. We didn't have the technology even at the time to do a sand simulation. None of our other films, we had done that. And so there was nothing to reuse. So we just put a guy back in the back room and gave him 6 weeks to build it and figure this out. And it worked out. And
Actually, it didn't turn out to be quite the horror story you thought it was going to be, huh?
no.
Yeah, actually, something else turned out to be the horror story.
Yes.
A simple net.
Yes, the net originally in the film was seen at night and didn't catch any characters. Here we see it in daylight and catch 3 dogs. So there was a lot of hand tweaking to get this net to look right.
Doug is so sweet, you really can't be mean to him. So when you meet him, you instantly love him, and he instantly loves you. But in the end, also, it's like all of the things that we did in the short actually was about being mean to Alpha, which tended to be okay because he was trying to be mean to Doug.
What I really liked about these shots was that we pushed his character even more, even on a technical level. His animation is so much more alive. His facial expressions were pushed farther in the short than it was in the film.
He's a little more cartoonier here. So during the making of the short, we were all talking in meetings like this. I do not like going over budget. The producer, the editor, hi, what problems do we have to solve today? I actually miss talking like Doug now.
Hey, are you okay over there?
I learned a lot from making this short. How to motivate people and how to talk about certain things, what to say, and what is meaningful.
What I liked is in my role, I got to learn more about story because with such a small team,
There's no compartmentalization. People talk to each other about the problems and brought all of their skills, regardless of what they're slated to do on this. They actually came together and tried to solve the problems, whether it's in story, technical, lighting, or whatever.
and the entire crew had a blast. Afterwards,
Yeah,
they're all like, let's
it
do
was
this
fun.
again.
Yes. It has been a good short to make.
Hi, my name is Josh Cooley. I'm the writer-director of George and AJ. So I came up with the idea for the short while I was drawing storyboards for the film Up, which is how I thought of the idea. And, I can't do this. Let's just use the narrator. Can we do that? Let's bring him in.
Hello, everyone. So, what can I do for you?
Hey, thanks for coming. We're recording this director's commentary for this short. I'm really bad at this. Do you think you can do it and make it sound more exciting?
Oh, sure. You mean like this? Live from the Pixar Animation Studios recording booth, located in fashionable Emeryville, California, you're listening to the George and AJ Director's Commentary with your host, writer/director Josh Cooley. So how was that?
Yeah, perfect. Keep going.
It was the month of September, the year 2008. Josh Cooley, a ruggedly handsome yet humble Pixar story artist, was working late drawing storyboards. Suddenly, he had an epiphany, and its name was George and AJ. This is the incredible true story of one man's journey to bring an animated idea to life. How did he do it? We'll find out right after this commercial break.
No. There's no commercials in the commentary.
Really? You sure about that?
Yeah.
All right. Bringing George and AJ to the screen was a daunting task. The film required one of the largest film crews in cinematic history. A staff of over 10,000 artists worked on the film for more than 24 years.
Whoa, wait a second. Actually, the crew was pretty small. I did all the drawings. Catherine Kelly animated them in After Effects, and Tim Fox cut the film. And we did it all in under a year.
Don't interrupt me again.
Nothing you're saying is true. You're not even following the script.
I don't care. I said don't interrupt me. The producers of George and AJ knew they had a hit on their hands, so they provided the film with a modest budget of $400 million.
No.
The budget is not apparent in the final film because the director spent most of that money on gold-plated jet skis and random vacation trips to Mexico.
Okay, not true. We didn't have a budget. It would have been too expensive to do in CG, so basically what you're watching is
A-list celebrities from around the globe flew to Pixar by jetpack to perform the voices in the film.
Actually, the actors are all people who work at Pixar. Again, because of the budget, it was just easier to go to people
The
that
musical score was performed completely impromptu by a 400-piece German Oompa band and a choir made up of actual angels.
No, the music is all film score from Up, written by Michael Giacchino, who composed other Pixar scores like Ratatouille, The Incredibles.
George and AJ is such a powerfully emotional film. It can heal the sick instantly upon viewing it.
No, it can't.
When the film was finished, all of the world's leaders united to watch George and AJ together.
You're a liar.
They declared it the single most important piece of entertainment ever seen by the human eye.
Are you done?
So the film was placed into a rocket and shot into space.
Stop talking.
In the hopes that it would reach distant alien planets and enrich their existence as well, which it did.
Would you please leave?
The Gorbak people of the planet Nolocon watch George and AJ twice daily, and it has become their sacred ritual.
I hate you.
And so we thank you, Josh Cooley, for bringing peace and balance to the galaxy through the power of animation.
Okay, we're done. Thanks to all these people whose names you see who supported this production, and thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Teddy Newton. I'm the director of Day and Night.
Hi, my name is Sandy Cartman. On Day and Night, I was the camera polisher and stereographer.
When I opened this picture, I wanted the audience to think they were watching a familiar cartoon they'd seen 100 times before. The idea was to fill the frame with customary cartoon imagery, only to break into something unfamiliar. Originally, my idea was to have a keyhole as a personality, so I drew a pair of cartoon eyes on this keyhole, and it could glance into itself, seeing a world within. But the novelty was limited, and I wanted this character to be mobilized, so I added legs, allowing him to walk around his environment, revealing more of his landscape. This inspired the idea that the background could mirror his personal state. Unlike other Pixar movies, a big portion of this was drawn by hand. These drawings were scanned into a computer and vectorized.
We had to take pencil and paper drawings, and we had to actually bring them into the computer. You have someone drawing at their desk, and you have someone else modeling this set in their computer. And they might as well be in two quadrants of the world. So one of the things that we did on Day and Night was we said, okay, you know what? We can't wait till you're done hand drawing. We can't wait till your set is done. We have to keep bringing these two worlds together, even when the art's not ready, so that we can test where we are.
Both teams basically had to eyeball this and hope this would actually merge together when we would, sandwich these two mediums.
The challenge was awesome. We were composing 3 movies at once. I was composing through the day character, the movie that Teddy wanted to see. I was composing through the night character, the movie that Teddy wanted to see. And then we were composing the 2 characters in a single frame. And all that was shot with 1 camera. And believe me, it was so hard, but I loved it.
Not only did I want the internal landscapes to reflect the experiences the characters were going through, I wanted the sound to do the same. Greg Snyder and Barney Jones supplied the sound effects for this picture. My first conceit was not to use any music at all. I wanted only naturalistic sounds that mirrored the actions of the characters. For instance, if Knight had an idea, an outhouse light would click on. If the two characters were grappling each other on the beach, we would only use sounds you'd hear on a beach to match with their movements. Eventually, we did end up using music, but primarily as source music that stemmed from the world.
When you started talking about your thoughts on this film, it kind of blew my mind because it's not that it's Day's world and Knight's world. It's actually they're in the same world, and Day sees it from his perspective, and Knight sees it from his perspective.
Right.
And so it's like it's a single world. It's just the audience is seeing two different perspectives.
That's exactly right.
That Pixar, Day and Night was the first film really conceived around the thought that this is going to be in stereo. Stereo is anything that's projected when you don't just see it on the flat screen. So stereo is like 3D.
If you saw this film in 3D, you'd notice that the stereo effects were deliberately played out quite flat at the beginning of the picture. And it wasn't until our characters became interested in one another that the depth became more evident.
Fear of the unknown.
This idea here with the radio tower was something I wanted to do from the very beginning. Years ago, my mother owned an audio recording of Dr. Wayne Dyer performing one of his lectures. It seemed as though his words were catered directly to the theme of the picture we were making. He talked about how people would often stay in their comfort zones instead of being open to new possibilities.
The audio, to me, was a microcosm of your entire short.
The most beautiful things in all the universe are the most mysterious.
Some people have told me that their favorite part of this film is the sunset moment where Day and Night turn into one another. But they really don't turn into the other. They are still who they are. They are still the same person. It's just that the thing inside them has changed. They come out of the experience seeing the world in a new way, empathizing with the other's worldview.
It's not that they switched worlds, it's that they saw each other's perspective.
Well, this looks like it's the end. Here's the credits. Look at these names here. These are the crew. I think these people actually exemplify the theme of the movie in the way they made the movie. They took on the fear of the unknown rather than strayed from it.
That's true. It was really kind of cool.
I am quite impressed by all of these people. I think everybody was very devoted. Yeah, good times.
Hi, I'm Gary Wrightson. I directed Hawaiian Vacation.
Hi, I'm Angus MacLean. I did the supervising of the animation.
And I'm Jason Katz. I was the story supervisor. And one of the things we knew going into this, it was the first Toy Story tune.
The goal is to show a different aspect of the toy universe, be it a genre of toy, or in this case, what the toys do when you go on vacation.
At the same time, we wanted to have all the characters we just saw in Toy Story 3 that we liked and see what they're doing now and give them all a moment in 6 minutes. And it's a little bit nuts to make a movie this short with 22 speaking roles.
Rexing ball! That's me! Can you make my arms bigger? Oh, yeah.
We didn't really know what we were going to end up with when we started. We just knew, we wanted it to feel like Toy Story and, having the music feel right.
To get all these actors to do the voices was a thrill for me because I got to meet people like Don Rickles, and Timothy Dalton did a great job of being an over-the-top director, directing the aliens whose performances were exactly the same every time.
Horrifying. Next.
Brilliant!
Bonnie's coming!
The idea was that Bonnie's backpack was this kind of magical elevator in between Sunnyside and Bonnie's room, and that was kind of established in Toy Story 3, I understand, right?
Yeah, we needed some way to show how the toys could communicate to Sunnyside. And passing a note through the backpack was what our solution was.
Here's a fun fact. There's no backpack straps on the backpack in the movie.
Here's your bag, Barbie.
We asked Michael Keaton, what would you say to Barbie to get her to smile? And he said, say sunscreen.
Say sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
Perfect. Click, click.
Although my favorite new prop is the camera that Ken has, which is a completely useless plastic thing with nothing but a hole in the middle.
What's funny for me about Ken is how limited his acting is. He walks kind of stiff, and his arms are pretty stiff, and you don't see his fingers move. There's a movie cheat.
Ken could not possibly leap up 5 feet to the window. I think the pilot guy is one of the deepest characters we've ever created, because the idea of a zipper pull who looks like a pilot but will never ever fly anywhere is tragic and funny.
Sorry, sir. I just zip and unzip. I don't actually fly.
Really, the biggest turn, is Ken in the backpack and wanting to give up.
I think Ken is the master of his own domain, but once you take him out of that world, he really is a fish out of water really, really easily. If you look carefully here, Buzz is not paying attention. He's self-centered enough to be like, I got it. I don't need to pay attention anymore.
The artwork for the Hawaii brochure was designed by Marty Bowman. It became the thread for the story because each of the events that the toys are going to recreate for us are listed in the brochure, so it gives us a roadmap for the whole short. In addition, Ken, of course, has ordered all the events with glitter pen, which technically I can tell you the glitter pen is tough to do in computer animation, getting that glitter to hit just right. We really had fun giving all the characters their own Hawaiian costume and what would they look like at a Hawaiian party. And the whole idea here is that the toys have to make do with the limitations of Bonnie's room.
It also helps the craftiness of not only Bonnie but the toys and kind of being able to put on a show, but it's if you had to do that in a preschool environment.
Luckily for us, we had limitations which kept the budget down, but I think it's funnier that the aquarium has no water in it and the aliens have to create the artificial bubbles.
The shark is live action.
An animated shark wouldn't have been as scary.
Yeah.
Estelle Harris, who does Mrs. Potato Head, was a riot, and we had to get her to say the Hawaiian state fish, which took a long time, and we had to write it out phonetically.
And the state fish, the humu humu nuku nuku apua.
And then Eric Benson, who worked in story, we just let him run wild with every Hawaii gag he could think of.
A lot of the gags where Ken was just getting the stuffing beat out of him.
You're not wearing any pants.
Strangely fun to help design costumes for Ken and Barbie. The Barbie outfit in their surfing shot is the first outfit Barbie was sold with. I like how the toys are clever enough to use a jigsaw puzzle box for the background of the surfing shot, which also for us film geeks, it looks like a process shot from the 60s. And Chuckles, voiced by Bud Lucky, sings a little song that Mark Mothersbaugh, the composer, wrote for us that we don't get to hear for very long, but it's a really lovely Hawaiian song.
The part here where Chuckles has a chant, what he's saying basically translates to bound and rebound as a reference to Bud Lucky's short Boundin'.
And the lighting as Stephen James was the shot with the glow stick that Buzz dances with, and the way it bounces the light off everything with the other lights in the background was one of my favorite looking shots in the movie. Not to mention one of my favorite animated shots in the movie.
Yeah, Neil Helm animated that. Did a really good job. Did a lot of reference for it. Like he looked at a ton of fire dancing footage and took it really, really seriously. And
I remember talking to Michael Arndt and Lee Unkrich at Toy Story 3, and they always talked about how Barbie was going to wear the pants in the family. Barbie was in charge. So it felt right that Barbie was the one that took that final step to get them to the romantic moment. Growing up in Chicago, snowy scenes to me could be both bleak and incredibly romantic. So the colors of the sunset in a snowstorm can be just as beautiful as a sunset at a beach.
That falling through the snow gate, we had to significantly change Bonnie's house to make that work. If you watch the end of Toy Story 3 and look closely, there's railings there. There's wood that stops them from doing that. And so we had to just remove those.
Yeah, until they fall off the deck.
this movie ends really, really strongly.
I'll get the shovel.
That last joke and the last line, and then it ends really cleanly.
There's this long pause before Ham says, I'll get the shovel. And editing, which Axel Geddes did the editing in this, is all about timing. So the pauses, if you like Jack Benny and things like that, pauses are more important than anything. Thanks for listening to this commentary, and a big thanks to all the people that worked on Hawaiian Vacation at Pixar. Everyone did an amazing job.
Hi, I'm Rob Gibbs, director of Mater's Tall Tales.
I'm Kim Adams, producer.
I'm Bob Hawley, production designer.
This is the 10th Cars tune, but the first Cars tune to be produced up at Pixar Canada.
John Lasseter came to me with this idea, what can we do with Mater next? Well, let's take him to the sky. We worked in conjunction with the folks in Canada to make this.
When they started up there, they had 15 crew, and 10 months later, when we finished, they were up to 60. The studio was under construction the entire time.
It's kind of a lot like the old Pixar. It's a very tight-knit, organized studio.
There's so much great work that went into the buildings in Prop West Junction and the characters.
Trying to reference older airports with the different sort of hangars and the old towers and the kind of quaintness of it. But then also you got to figure out where do
planes live, what do their houses look like. Clearly the driveways are wider, they've got wider garages, the streets are wider, but they still have picket fences. This was a chance for us to kind of explore how airplanes work as characters. So it's getting this kind of a less aggressive, kind of more flight team looking, appealing jet. Skipper's an older Corsair, and one of the tricky things about this was first time we were seeing an airplane, so we had to kind of figure out what is the rule set. You know, they're a little more chummy, they're a little squatter, where do the eyes live, that sort of thing.
And the mouth making that read.
Exactly.
We needed Skipper to have a little sidekick in order to suit up Mater, and of course, whenever we need a character to do anything in the Cars world, we usually throw a forklift in there because they're the only ones that logically can do anything.
They have arms.
It's really, these airplanes, it's really quite a helpless world.
And another thing that was fun was to incorporate actual airplane terminology. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, it's got to make some sort of sense. We got to,
Yeah, those instruction cards are real, right? Aren't they based
We
on
created
real?
Well, they're
them,
kind of
but
based on some, yaw
Real-ish.
pitch, all those things.
The airplanes have faces on them, so that's something Bob, I think, insisted on. So what's fun about Mater in this state of being an airplane is he doesn't really fly awesomely until he starts going backwards. So having that telephone wire gag that propels him backwards, and it's like, of course, Mater is the world's best backwards driver, so why wouldn't he be the best backwards flyer, right?
He's a natural.
He's 100% committed.
Yes.
Yeah, 110.
You see a lot of these airplane forms in the environment in the background. And I know that was a little tricky for a while because it looked like these giant derelict planes resting among.
Looked like dead airplanes.
It looked
They
odd.
They looked really dead.
So it was kind of this integration of those forms into a landscape that made sense.
Yeah, and coming up with a name for the Falcon Hawks. Pretty much everything was taken that was awesome, anything that involved every bird, thunder, lightning, everything cool. And so I think John just came in and said, just make it Falcon Hawks. It's two birds, of course. Makes perfect sense. There's a gag I really wanted to get in there, but I kind of waited too late to do it. When the Falcon Hawks fly over the corn and you see it blowing in the wind, I wanted all the corn to pop into popcorn.
Wasn't there a big deal about corn and how much corn and tall enough around the runway and all that?
Yeah, well, we kept asking for more corn. We referenced a lot of DVDs and videos that had formation flying from all different flight teams.
Just those angles of being under the wing and then the split screen.
Mm-hmm. They do this a lot where they lock a camera onto one jet and then so you can see part of that jet and then what's going on around it with the other jets. I love that stuff.
My favorite shot.
Yeah. At one point, we were trying to get the short down to a shorter length, basically. And so I had done this trim pass, and I took out some of the gags, the bowling pin gag and the tic-tac-toe gag, and just kept the Mater masterpiece that he painted. And we showed that to John, and he said, you took out everything that was fun about it. So we showed him the longer version with those gags in. He goes, yes, that's what you have to do.
Bill Cohn, Tony Christoph we're all production designers on this one together. You could just watch this thing and just only watch the skies because it's really just beautiful. The lighting that Bill set up in terms of the time of day. And you start earlier in the day, so it's this constant chase of pushing the time of day later and later. So you get to the point where he's flying up there and he's in the sun and the earth is kind of falling into shadow so that you can set up for the fireworks later.
It's beautiful.
We had Mater kind of land and then the fireworks go off and John's like, have Mater push a button, make him active there. So he pushes his button and then, of course, the M at the end. It was great to watch that company grow from the very beginning and using Air Mater as the tool to get the studio in Canada going, to see it go from 15 people up to 60 or 70 and to really get to know people individually.
And what's nice is it's not just a handoff. You're working together with them, so you still do feel like you're a team.
It's a collaboration. Yes.
Hello, my name is Angus MacLean, writer-director of Small Fry, the second Toy Story tune. I love toys. I really enjoy fast food toys. I also grew up in a family of psychologists. My sister and my mom are both psychologists. So out of that, Small Fry was born. For this film, I went out and I went to 15 fast food restaurants in my hometown of Portland, Oregon in like a day, just to see a snapshot of what toys are being made now. And that's how we based the assortment for the Star Command display in the beginning. Buzz Lightyear is the coolest toy, and the coolest toy in the display is always sold out. And the belt buckle is the toy you don't want that you'll always get.
When I was in college, I worked at a ball pit. I had a whistle, and I made sure that the kids played nice. As a kid, the ball pit is the dream come true. I don't know why, but as a kid, you just want to live in a ball pit. As a teen and an adult, you realize that the ball pit is a nightmare. It was not a sanitary place. Working with the original voice talent from the Toy Story films is a real treat because they know the characters really, really well. The characters in the support group are so weird that to have this kind of the anchor of the original voice talent that reminds the audience it's a Toy Story short allows for the kind of weirdness in the other parts. Each of these characters in the support group represents, to me, a different genre of the types of things that were going around the popular culture in the early 80s when I was growing up. They're kind of cheaply made. Each has like one function, and the limitations that are within those toys are something I find incredibly appealing. The concept is taking two ridiculous ideas and mashing them together. Super pirate or ninja clown. It's very clear. It's two things that don't go together, and you get a laugh from that. Taekwondo is one of the more shameless puns, and that really came from this idea of a character whose hand was up, but that was just part of their function.
Yes, Taekwondo.
It kind of looks a little bit like Bambi's mom. So maybe Bambi's mom didn't die. Maybe she joined an international mixed martial arts fighting circuit. I talked at length with my mom and my sister about what types of personalities you would have in a support group. And they were talking about just different stages people might be at. Naturally, the big Buzz Lightyear, he's in the denial stage as far as Neptuna sees, because he hasn't been able to accept that he has an issue. Recycle Ben is at acceptance. He's meant to be this kind of PSA character that gets kids excited about recycling. Franklin is kind of at anger, Franklin the Eagle. He's from a fictitious CGI film called Constitutional Condors that tells the story of the Revolutionary War, kind of reimagined in the United States, populated by anthropomorphized birds. Probably my favorite character is T-Bone. I just like the idea of something really kind of disgusting like a T-bone steak transforming into a robot. It's such a wrong, crazy idea. In the TV show, the Steak Force fears the healthy, life-extending agenda of the evil vegetarians. So then the government establishes the Steak Force, a commando squad of heroic robots dedicated to mandating a meat option for every meal. And the whole show would be sponsored in part by the Meat Council, which I think we made up. I don't think there's an American Meat Council. There's separate councils for different types of meat. John wanted me to make sure that I had backstories for all of the characters in the group. What toy line they came from. Was it from a TV show? Was it from a movie? And so I wrote them all out. I also wrote out what were the other toys in that assortment, say for the Steak Force promotion for T-Bone, or the Rappin' Robin in the Hood promotion for Funky Monk. And John would kind of quiz me. We'd be in a review and he'd be like, "Oh, what's the beef stewardess? What's the story? Oh, she's from the airline Dairy Air. It's about a barnyard airline." I think in general that's what we try to do, is put things into the film that made us laugh, but have it not be so personal to us that it didn't read to the audience. You know, you write these jokes and then you record it and you just kind of take what's funny, and along the way what's funny changes depending on what stage of production you're in. And you try your best to listen to it with fresh ears each time you see it. Gary Grappling Hook is really just a narrative device as like a funny way to get Buzz out of the scene. Gary is one of the few toys that actually gets used and has his moment. There's a complete arc for Gary. Plus, I think grappling hooks are the coolest piece of paraphernalia that you can have. I wanted Neptuna to be a strong female warrior who's this mythological combination of a mermaid and this kind of Roman gladiator with like the kind of typical sea denizen axe to grind with humankind's destruction of the planet. I just think it would be a really cool toy. A lot of these ones, yeah, they're cheap toys, but I really like the toy itself. I wanted to make cool toys in the movie because I think if you start with a toy that looks cool and feels real, even though it's not real, like there is no one toy that Neptuna is based on, but there are ideas behind each of the visuals, really specific things. As with all of the toys, they're a lot smaller. You get to see a lot more detail of the manufacturing defects. It actually takes a lot more time to make something imperfect and crummy looking. So When you see all these characters and you see all their imperfections, that's just a bunch of work.
My sponsor. I know now that the real prize is inside of each and every one of us.
The end credit menu items were the most disgusting menu items we could think of. I think they all end in 99 cents, except for the sandwich, the $2 cluck, which is $2. As you can see from the credits here, a ton of people worked on this film, and they worked really, really hard. The production of this film was done in Pixar Canada, which had never done a Toy Story film before, and this is only their second film after Air Mater. And I think it looks like just a continuation of Toy Story 3, technically. I think it's a real achievement, and I thank everyone who worked on it. It was either going to be Chicken Chopper, Taekwondo, or Tai Cheetah. Taekwondo won out.
Hi, I'm Rob Gibbs, director of Time Travel Mater.
Hi, I'm Torben Bullock, the picture editor.
Tony Christoph, production designer.
Well, welcome to Time Travel Mater.
If I'm lying, I'm crying. So we called this a Pixar Laugh-O-Gram in honor of Walt Disney's original studio.
So a while back, Scott Morris, one of our story artists, boarded a little short that never got made, but it was really charming, where Mater goes back in time. And John Lasseter really liked that idea that Mater would go back in time and witness the history. So John wanted to actually tie in Cars Land at Disneyland and the beginnings of Radiator Springs. So when he is transported back in time, that's where he ends up. I think an earlier version, he gets struck by lightning, and that sends Mater back in time. Right. One of our story artists, Valerie Lapointe, came up with the idea that this clock falls on Mater's air filter, and he sneezes and goes back in time. So, whenever Mater tells one of these tall tales, it's a story that actually happened, but this is his version and they're retelling it.
And when Mater thinks about past events, he thinks about it in the context of the films that he's seen or the television shows that he's watched. So when he goes back in time and he arrives in the past, it's in a early silent cinema sepia tone wash.
Well, howdy.
So when he first goes back in time, we start in 1909 when Stanley first arrives in Ornament Valley. In the early days of cinema, all the cameras were cranked by hand, and it was very difficult to crank them consistently. So you get this kind of flickering because there's a little bit more light is let in as the crank goes slower or faster.
As we were going through our lighting reviews, my instinct is to perfect the lighting as much as we always do it here at Pixar. But with the sepia tones and with the black and white, you kind of had to go with the imperfection of the technology of the time. I always had to kind of stop myself from making notes that would make it perfect in a 21st century kind of way.
I think the original story, Stanley was a prospector and he discovered the spring and set up a town. But I thought it'd be much more convenient if he was a traveling radiator cap salesman. That way he has his caps with him.
Hey, Stanley, there's a car.
And this is the first time we've actually seen Stanley alive. He's always been just a bronze statue. So working with the studio in Vancouver, we had to figure out how everything works. His little menu of radiator caps there, where he keeps his caps. I love his Cap-O-Matic.
It's so cool, a Cap-O-Matic, especially all those different designs who came up for all the different radiator caps.
So we didn't have a lot of cars of that era.
Oh yeah, we needed some background characters. Personally, I love old cars, so I spent some time just drawing old cars, and we showed a bunch of different designs to John Lasseter to see which ones he would respond to. Of course, his answer was yes. So we ended
all
up...
of them.
We built about almost a dozen characters. And I tried to come up with a story for every one of them, like a backstory, like something. I mean, there's so much detail in those characters that probably would never be able to see. But hopefully people will get to enjoy them in a form of toys.
Yeah. It was really fun working with folks in Canada creating this time travel effects.
And then when you get into this 1920s era, this black and white they've done is amazing. It's not the film noir of the 1940s, which is a lot of very sharp edges, but still a slightly soft but more consistent image. For all you film nerds out there, the adding of silver into nitrate film is what enabled you to get lots of really graduated shadows. We also get very inspired by the music of different eras. We thought the music of like Keystone Cops and Laurel and Hardy and the Hal Roach studios from the teens really felt great for this short. It really inspired us in its small combos.
So also a lot of the dialogue and phrases that we use, we research and try to make it as authentic as possible. So the banter, the back and forth banter between Stanley and Lizzie, we try to keep that, kind of the era.
Hubba, hubba, aren't you the cat's pajamas?
My favorite was, applesauce.
Oh, applesauce.
Because that's something that my grandfather, who is, as of this recording, 99 years old, I've actually heard him say. That's a call to my grandfather, Thomas Edward Bullock of Castro Valley, California.
And I love that this is he takes her in to buy her a wedding ring, basically. They fall in love instantly.
Yeah, we call this whole drive their date.
Should know how to treat a girl.
Ah, shucks.
So she merges with this diamond radiator cap. And without actually saying, "Will you marry me?" you just say, "Do you like it?" "I do. I really do."
I love it when Rob is so romantic.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And then we move forward into the 1930s, something called the two-strip Technicolor process. They would record separate images onto a piece of film of the red and blue-green spectrums, and it gives you this kind of neat pastel-y sort of look.
So much fun. I'm hoping people will get married in Cars Land and put
Comfy cabins.
Lizzie and Stanley wedding cake toppers on their cake.
They're building Cars Land down at Disneyland. And to see it done in real, actually, not just in CG, not just in a computer, with the same degree of attention to detail was very, very inspiring.
Yeah.
Please step aside.
I love that we were so insistent on being as authentic as we were.
Yeah.
So that when you go to the park and you've seen the short, you'll remember it looking exactly like it does. Our version of the Stanley's Oasis, however, is a brand new version of it because that's when he first built it. What you'll see at Cars Land is the charming ghost town version of Stanley's Oasis. And thus, history is made.
Restored.
First
question is, if they hadn't gone back in time, would it have happened at all? Did they create the history by going back in time?
It's really confusing, actually.
Don't think about it too much.
Hi, I am Enrico Casarosa, and I'm the director of La Luna.
I'm Kevin Rear, the producer of La Luna.
The basic story, it comes a little bit from my childhood. We lived with my grandfather, and my dad and my grandfather never quite got along. So I was the little kid stuck between these two big personalities, and I thought that would be an interesting core to build a story around. Because, of course, trying to find your own way and trying to find your own fate is something we all can relate to.
The film has such a watercolor look to it.
Yeah, I kind of write with images at the beginning in pencils and watercolors. We call them image boards or beat boards. And at first I really did like 20 images that were watercolors, and everybody seemed to react to that. So that gave us something to aim for. I thought also we had a story that was very much like a fable, a story that would support a more illustrative, stylized look. So we really brought this feeling of texture. For example, the moon glow as this texture that's given by a watercolor paper texture. So we try to give it to objects, to glows, to the characters, and especially to the backgrounds. What you see in the background, they're pastels done by Bill Cohn, our production designer. It was really fun to put actual media, actual artwork made by hand on the screen. I think that gave a different feel to the short, which is really what I was after.
How about your trip to the Genovese boat yard?
We wanted a boat that felt old, centuries and generations. I went back to Italy, close to where I grew up, and I found this wonderful old Cantiere Navale Topazio, which is they're just masters at making old wood boats. And the characters in there were amazing. The old boat maker was a lot like Grandpa. He was very opinionated. He felt like, if you don't make a boat with wood, it has no soul, And it's so painstaking the way that boats are made. So we kind of took that upon us, and we really watercolored board by board of this wooden boat. So we felt in our own way, in our own digital way, we really took the time to build this boat.
Pay homage to what they do and the craftsmanship. When we went to John Lasseter and we talked about the score, and he said, well, we have this Italian guy who's worked for us on a couple of movies. What about Michael Giacchino?
Oh, it was so wonderful to work with Michael. We really made him reach for his roots. He was excited to listen back to Fellini old scores, Nino Rota, and a lot of also folk music, simple guitar music from Naples. Was really inspired by what had inspired me in making the movie. And he really captured something that feels almost Fellini-like, and that was the most I could really hope. And he's such a collaborator. He's a real storyteller. He really understands how to support the story with his music.
You have gibberish through the whole thing. Why do gibberish and not
gibberish?
Yeah,
I felt there was a little bit of texture, again, that I wanted in there, something that could be a little more pointed. Gibberish is hard to do, and it took us a while to find the right tone. I felt that it could still be very Italian and work with characters that were gesturing a lot. We wanted to capture an Italian flavor and still be very universal. That's the wonderful thing about gibberish. No translations needed, so there's this wonderful thing of the very specific that becomes kind of still very universal. And we found two amazing performers that really embodied the characters. That's what we found was important. One is Tony Fucile, who's an amazing animator who's been in the animation industry for many, many years, but he's a real big daddy. And we also found a great grandpa in a storyteller here in San Francisco, Phil Sheridan. And he was wonderful and very much the character. Before then, we always had someone who was just trying to sound old, and that never quite worked.
And the best part was when he said, "Do you want me to do it with my teeth or without my teeth?"
Oh, yes.
And then he set his teeth down on the table and proceeded to do all the gibberish with no teeth.
With no teeth, yeah. Everything you hear is without the teeth. We were kind of half scared and half excited about that.
Talk a little bit about the sound effects.
Justin Pearson, our sound designer, he went through so much trouble to really try and get the stars to feel simple. I really want to contrast in the way that the stars appeared when Dad and Grandpa were dealing with it. So tile-like, pebble-like, something very mundane, because to them it wasn't important. And then go with a slightly more magical feel when he knocks into the big star. We wanted to feel like there's hundreds and hundreds of stars in there with their own tone, and that took us a while to get right.
Talk a little bit about how you found the star, the reflection, the glow.
The glow in the stars. Yes, the stars were, from the beginning, I imagined them to be like almost like a frosted bottle kind of feel, a little candle inside a frosty glass. And we had a lot of pastels of glows. So again, I was looking for texture that was imperfect and man-made. And then we overlapped a lot of them. And one of our actually Italian artists, Davide Pesare, did the star shading, and he added all these wonderful, on top of the glow, all these wonderful scratches and little sparkly bits. I wanted these stars to feel like they were as old as the universe, so that they had gone through a lot.
They traveled.
Yeah, they had different glow, different age. Someone's brighter, someone not as bright, and it's smoky. I love that. I want a keychain of that. Or,
a nightlight.
Or a nightlight, yes. The credits were a lot of fun to do because I storyboarded the whole show kind of in this style, and in the credits I was kind of able to just put it right on the screen.
We also want to thank the crew who've gotten behind this show and really embraced it and been these Italian wannabes who have just loved the movie and have done a great job.
Absolutely. I want to thank each one of our lunatics.
We love the lunatics.
They put so much work, and they really are the ones that made La Luna possible.